Hi, guys. Welcome to the Spilling the Tea Leaves podcast with Rachel and Michelle.
Hello.
We're gonna tackle something really juicy today. We're gonna be jumping into some shadow work. Um, it's a term that gets thrown around a bit, and Michelle and I are going to start by just making sure we're at least all on the same page here, kind of what we mean with regards to shadow work, and why you might want to jump into some of the darker aspects of your spiritual path, and what it can do with you, for you, if you do so. And Michelle and I actually just we're chatting a bit before we started the podcast itself about our own shadows, and it's not always easy work, right, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that many of us in the New Age community either completely uh, embrace it, and we're going to talk about what the definition of that is, or bypass it. And we commonly refer to it as spiritual bypassing, where it's like, no, 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 it's a negative emotion, only love and light and positivity. And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. And doing that, ignoring our shadow side, starts inviting in a lot of damage to ourselves, which then holding it in long enough will translate into a physical stress for ourselves. But
It can.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, this is heavy stuff. This is the stuff that a lot of people don't prefer not to talk about because it's not a nice subject. It's not crystals. It's not candles. It's not rituals and spells. Real. This is real work. So this is if you're on this path, I invite you to sit down with a cup of coffee, preferably with a notebook on the side. Um, and see if you can start making yourself almost whole again.
And I think that's the key term here. Whole. It's a practice, and it's something that Michelle and I work towards, in different ways on our paths. But in order to, as far as we kind of intuit and understand our spiritual paths, in order to get where we are going or where we'd like to go, it's an integrative practice. It's all very well and good to look at the things that are higher vibe, and as much as you want to focus there and maybe strive to be there more than not, that still leaves us with a lot of aspects of not only ourselves but of humanity, of humanity's history, that is not is not where we want to be. It's not what we aim towards or strive for. But being able to hold space with it and integrate that into who you are as a being, and who we are as beings, is to us, a completely necessary part of the path. I think a lot of the image of the yin yang, of the darkness within the light and the light within the darkness, it's just not, sadly, somewhat sadly, possible to have one without the other as much as we would like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can't have day without night. You can't recognize light without darkness. And yeah, do you want to start? Do you want to talk a little bit about the term shadow work or the history of it?
I do. It was interesting for me to research this term. We've talked a bit about what a book and research nerd I am, so this was right up my alley. There are a few late 19th century, early 20th century psychologists, like Freud, is part of that sort of canon, but Carl Jung, and it's spelled Jung. So Carl Jung, actually is the first person to have broached the topic of these two archetypes: the shadow persona, the shadow self, and then your sort of persona. So whereas other psychological theories break it down, like for example, Freud talks about like the id, the ego, and the superego. So anyway, there's a lot of, like a lot of mythological and archetypal information you can delve into here, lots of rabbit holes, which I love to go down. But for the purposes of this particular conversation, know that Carl Jung um, introduced the idea of the persona, which is the love and the light and the crystals,
Mhm.
the part of yourself that you embrace, the part of humanity that we embrace, the oh goodness, and the soup kitchens, and the the spiritual growth, and like holding hands and singing together kumbaya. Like that's the persona, that's good stuff, that's what we want, versus the shadow self, which is anything that you as a human being or your family, culture, society deem inappropriate,
Mhm.
bad, destructive. And this can run the gamut. And the interesting thing, too, is that there are different things that each person, group, family, society deem inappropriate. So, for instance, one of the um, we'll start on a sort of funnier note. So I think I've mentioned, and you can probably hear from my accent, that I'm American. I grew up in the Midwest. I have generally pretty Midwestern sensibilities, and my family recently moved to New Zealand. The New Zealanders have a significantly more open attitude to profanity, especially when it comes to kids. So it is
Really?
not,
Okay.
no, really. So like it is not unusual for and I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So they're quite young, school age, but quite young. It is not unusual for me on any given day at the playground to hear things like, oh hell, what are you doing, or like, and this, but again, like it's quite innocent, whereas as an American, that would be something we would shut down quite quickly. It's just not considered appropriate behavior, even for adults. I mean, I think my mother-in-law especially would be horrified if I spoke that way in front of her, much less my kids. So again, this is kind of an innocent example of something that is considered, and it's kind of, I guess, cheeky. I wouldn't say it's fully acceptable, but it's kind of like a funny, naughty, acceptable here. Whereas in the United States, if a 5-year-old said, like, what the hell are you doing? Everyone would be a
They would
little,
lose their marbles. Yeah.
like,
They
you
would
know, so,
lose their mental. Yeah.
so so again, I want to put that out there as we begin to explore, because to me it helps kind of loosen up the ideas at least a little bit, and remember to kind of gently hold these shadow aspects of yourself, as we go into this process together, because what you see as quite bad or inappropriate might be completely acceptable down here in New
To
Zealand.
somebody. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, these are.
yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, these are just to round that out. These are sides that sometimes we're not fully conscious of.
True.
And these are also a side where you do not want to identify with. These are things that you don't want to say, oh well, I am not a greedy person. And a lot of these times where we can identify these sort of traits in other people, where it's so much easier to see other
Projection.
people, you start projecting. And I do that often. I see that where I'm just like, oh God, I really don't like her. And when you start questioning like why you don't like her, he's like, oh well, I'm probably projecting that. So keep that in mind when we start talking about shadow work, and that side that we try to keep in the shadows, or that side that we don't identify with, or that unconscious part of us that it's like, well, that's not me. I am not that type of person. Where we are better than our shadow sides. But yes, cursing in front of children for us You know what? In my family, my parents cursed left and right. Actually, they dropped bombs everywhere, but the kids were not allowed to say it. So it was like this
Ah.
weird. Like my parents and my family, they would. I heard horrible things, but if a kid said anything remotely close to it, we would get slapped in the mouth quickly, and probably with a shoe.
That's a whole nother. We'll put a pin in that. That's
That's shadow work.
God,
There's
that's
more to that after. That's me not speaking my truth, but it's true. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue to the next topic.
it's interesting though, and yes, we're kind of, diving in here on some lighter notes, but Michelle did mention things like greediness, or some other examples are anger. Anger is an emotion that is often, I mean, I actually want to make like a mortar and pestle kind of like sign, like with my hands. Like it is something that is ground down in people, because it's difficult for others to often take. And so things like anger is one that comes up, and it's fairly natural to react to things like injustice or abuse in an angry way. But yet again, things like gaslighting or teaching people to suppress their anger or question their own anger is often one of the things that we're taught, especially as young people, especially as young women. Anger is seen as unbecoming, unfeminine. Um,
Yep.
Rage is taking anger even a bit more into the extreme category. Things like control, wanting to manipulate, which is another sort of type of control. Envy is
Yeah,
another
that's
one.
a big
Yeah, no, truly, and I
one.
think the proliferation of social media
Oh,
has, you're it's, you're looking at these images and
oh,
stories, and people don't put their shadow on Insta. They put
wow.
yeah, no, like it's, yeah, like you don't see the darkness. You not only do you see the persona, the good part that people want you to see, but then you see it completely filtered, branded,
Express. Yeah,
packaged. Yeah, exactly. Like
yeah.
it's yes, into these perfectly consumable little bites of only
Hmm.
love and light. Um, it's yeah, there are a lot of things, and we're not even getting into some of the um I want to say bigger ticket issues of shadow self, like where you actually want to act on it. Like, oh my God, I am so angry. I just want to hit her in the mouth. And this brings up this is probably a good time to talk about bringing up these aspects of ourselves or our culture is not an invitation to act. You might be
No.
so angry that you want to kick something, and I think that's part of the work that we do with our shadows. Is we recognize that there are productive, or at least non-destructive, ways to handle our shadows, and handle these destructive aspects of our being, without becoming destructive or
Destructive.
hurting others. Yeah, no, um that's,
Pa-
and go ahead, Michelle.
Well, part of doing shadow work is almost kind of, at least for me, it's letting a little bit of the steam out from the pressure cooker.
Yep.
So the more you go into why you're feeling this way, or the more you go into exploring your shadow side, the more power it kind of loses almost too, because you are now recognizing why certain things are triggers for you, why certain people elicit a very specific reaction for you. So when you start recognizing it and then becoming whole with it, saying, well, I feel this way because I had daddy issues growing up, or I grew up without having. So this is why I feel that. When you start recognizing it and knowing what it is, you start losing that knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, I just want to punch her in the face. And then actually doing it. You're letting out some pressure out of that pressure cooker. Because when you
Okay.
don't do that, that is what happens where people have these rage-filled incidents that we see so many of on YouTube, like road rage, or what's the recent one that just happened where some dads got into a fight at a baseball game or like
Oh
kids
gosh,
softball.
yes, yes. They were like it was like a game for 7-year-olds, and can you
Yeah.
imagine? And we have all been there. I have compassion for these parents, right? Because
I
I, like
get
I
it.
my my little ones have been a bit under the weather, and it's interesting because they we when we're a little down or physically ill, we need a little extra care, and so I've been giving extra snuggles and blah blah blah, and it's interesting because I can feel when I'm reaching my limit, and if I don't honor that, suddenly I'm snapping at these little kids, and it's like, I cannot snuggle you anymore, give me 5 minutes, I don't want anyone to look at me, I don't want anyone to talk at me, and that's
Yeah.
that's a somewhat more watered down example, but it's like Michelle was saying, if I'm not watching this kettle boil, and
Yeah.
suddenly it just like the steam's going to come out, and someone's going to get burned, and that's not fair to me, certainly not fair to my poor kids who just need some mommy time, but also like I need my own space. So I really like the situation at the baseball game. These parents just really lost their minds, but I also, you have financial pressures coming in, you've got the kids homework to do, probably somebody blew a tire on the way there. I mean, but the point is, like, if you have really suppressed the anger and the disappointment and the like, no, like, I'm fine, we're going to get through this, this is, just think positively. Well,
Love and light. Everything is love and light. I can't have
yeah,
any negative emotions. That's triggering. At some point, somebody's just
yes.
gonna come in and push the barista's gonna get the wrong order at Starbucks, and everybody's getting coffee in their faces.
God. I mean, the phrase,
Everybody's
it's the straw that broke the camel's back has been around
literally.
for bajillion years, but it's true. Like, we, in the interest of, yeah, and yes, I'm not saying, like, I'm not saying just embrace your shadow and be awful all the time. What I'm saying is,
Yeah.
you know, welcome in, like, hey, welcome, we're people, and some of this is hard and some of this is not what we'd like it to be. So let's recognize that and figure out how to work with that so that we don't have the one straw that breaks our back because we've been ignoring it or suppressing it all this time. And to me, that's what shadow work is. It's recognizing these straws are on our back, and we need to deal with them. And I apologize. I was trying to figure out where this quote came from, and Michelle, maybe you can help me, but I I read somewhere or was speaking with someone about doing shadow work, and essentially this might actually be Clarissa. Hang on, let me get the name right. Clarissa Pinkola Estes in the book The Women Who Run with Wolves. Incredible book.
Okay.
Anyway, really powerful. But again, correct me if I'm wrong, or please comment if you know. But essentially, the with your shadow, you can't get rid of it. Sorry, folks. Michelle and I've tried. So
Yeah, did
essentially,
we try?
what you want to do is create or construct a really lovely, like, minimum security psychiatric ward, and put your shadow there and make sure that your shadow knows it's taken care of. Visit your shadow often. You do want to keep it in the ward. It does, again, we recognize that these are aspects of our selves that we don't want to act on for whatever reason. However, your shadow's not going away, and your shadow needs attention, and your shadow does need care. These are emotions that are going to come up. So what
Yeah.
do you like, how do you deal with that? And like I said, the imagery that I had read at some point, and I want to say it was Estes in her book, was creating this beautiful, like I imagine like lots of like white benches and like cypress trees, and keeping
Even
your
as a night
shadow.
cycle for your
Right.
shadow side. There's crystals and there's nights in the
Right.
afternoon.
Right. Like,
Somebody's gonna play the music for you later. Well, I don't know if she was the person that I'm thinking of. Your author was obviously very specific and made it really, really nice. But there's another author that I love and who spoke about shadow side, and he has fully embraced his shadow side and made billions or millions of dollars. And he said something along the same lines, and that is Stephen King. Stephen King said, "Your shadow side goes in a
ah,
cage, and you keep him in a cage, and every so often you take him out and you let him go for a little walk, and then you put him right back in, and then you lock him again." So yours sounds much nicer than Stephen King's, but Stephen King he's one of those people that has fully embraced his
yeah,
shadow side and his demons and written about his demons and made himself almost whole. He has made himself whole because he has embraced the positive side, and he has embraced these numerous demons that he has, from drug use to just horrible
yeah.
things. Um, and people love him because they recognize something in him and themselves and him and themselves and him. Um, and he's one of the examples, I think, where when you do embrace that side, you kind of unlock all this like potential for yourself.
It's true, and I think a lot of it too is not just about the potential for yourself, but also potential for connection with humanity. I think the reason that Stephen King has such incredible reach, aside from the fact that he's actually an amazing
He's
human.
incredibly talented. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, and I love reading his art. I mean, he's just, anyway, he's very accessible, but I think it gives it gives him, or whoever you are working with your shadow, a chance to actually connect, which to me is one of the tenets of my spiritual path, is actually connecting with other spirits. One of the most shadowy times of my life was my immediate postpartum period after I had my first child. And I don't know if Michelle and I've actually explicitly said this. So I've um, depression and anxiety are part of my physical path and history here on planet Earth in this incarnation. So after I had my son, my firstborn, it was no real shock to me that I was having postpartum depression. And I remember really just wanting to give him to, like there were no wolves where we lived when he was born, but I imagined laying him down at the feet of like a pack of wolves and saying, please take care of him, and walk away. And and that's, but it's interesting because there's such a stigma about mothering and motherhood and how you're supposed to feel when you have a baby, and there's a lot of isolation that new mothers can feel. But anyway, with me sharing this story with other young mothers at the time, it just, if nothing else, it just felt like almost like cracking an egg open and letting light in, like. And that again, that's what the shadow work is about. It's about just making these little inroads, these little cracks on the things that are like, I felt so sad, like that I didn't love him, or at least in that moment didn't know how to. And it was dark and it was scary, and I felt hideous as a human and a mother, but again, like I said, sharing. And so when I think about Stephen King and him taking these rather terrifying, shadowy ideas in his work and putting them out there just to share them around. It really is, again, about bringing these shadow aspects to light, and in as Michelle said, in Stephen King's words, just taking your shadow out for a walk Like let's all look at this and help each other, and then very gently put that shadow back. Like, let me hold your baby for a little while. Why don't you get a nap? Like that's what shadow work is about too.
Rosemary's Baby, but okay. Let me hold your baby rest. Yeah, it's funny.
Oh,
Sorry, I just had that image like flash in my head, like, I'll hold your baby, you can rest. Okay. When we do shadow work, we start healing ourselves. We start healing ourselves from a lot of past traumas, and a lot of the biggest gurus and people that we do tend to follow, they start revealing their natural abilities after they recognize their shadow side. So when you start working on your shadow side, you start tapping into another side, repressed emotions that start
yes.
working into your daily lives. And a lot of our um, how do I say it, our life's mission or what we are meant to do is represented in our shadow side. That's why there's so many times that people that come from trauma are those who are ready to help heal those because they have recognized where they have come from. They have recognized what these emotions that they had to work through. And now a lot of them are ready to teach or to help. Like you were saying that your postpartum helped other women crack a shell, letting that later. That's a huge thing. You came into light with your shadow side and started helping others. So when you start working on your shadow side, you do start tapping into your ability to either help or whatever your mission is here on earth, whatever your path is. So doing shadow work does help you and in turn help
True.
others around you.
True.
Yeah. Well,
It's
one thing I did wrote is we may deny them, but we can never get rid of them. We can
yeah.
ignore, we can suppress it. We can drown ourselves in crystals and sage and use every essential oil known to man, but they are not going away
No.
ever.
And and they come up in funny ways. It's like you can sort of, like let's say like road rage, we'll just use road rage as an example. Like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, so you decide you're going to have crystals in your car and you're going to listen to like meditative like podcast as you're driving, and like, but then suddenly you find that you are screaming your face off at the pharmacist because they're making you wait an extra 20 minutes. Like, so it's funny because these things that you think you've conquered or have worked on or have successfully ignored, repressed, whatever. Okay, that's done. Off you go, little shadow, and like we'll lock that with 16 little locks. Okay. Um, Suddenly you find that it pops up, or it can be something really weird and physical, like, why am I 40 years old and I have acne? Why am I getting these angry?
I have a lot of
Am I,
acne, but
this is not meant as a personal attack on anyone. This
I'm
is just,
triggered.
I'm triggered. But again, it's like suddenly these things that you kind of thought were, you'd successfully dealt with, or again, like saged away, like
Yeah.
they're then suddenly like, why is this popping up? Michelle and I were not having a laugh. This is actually not fun, but I've actually been having some back issues for a while. Interestingly, now that this is coming up, it started in pregnancy. And so my firstborn, my son, is like 7.5 now, and but anyway, and I have so Michelle and I were talking about how low back issues can have to do with repressed rage, and it's like, on the one hand, I don't want to hear that, like like sure, not me, like everyone else, but no, this is just totally like spinal slash, like musculoskeletal. But then it's like, man, when things ring true, you can hear it. So it's interesting to see
Yeah.
um, how these things manifest. And and I've been working, maybe not spiritually, maybe not sort of in this form. I mean, and I certainly um, didn't identify at least openly as a witch until fairly recently, etc. But I've been doing a lot of emotional work for, gosh, 15 to 20 years. And this stuff, like, you think you've got it, you think you kind of have it, and then it comes up again, and then and then new things happen in your life, and it just throws a wrench in the works, or old things come up. And um yeah, I mean,
It
you
just
do.
add a little bit of water, and then they just like keep multiplying into this rage-filled little beans.
But I think too, like the what we talked about earlier, like Stephen King, like it's not just about like making peace with your shadow and then locking it away. You have to regularly attend to this stuff, because it does tend to kind of like hang out and then grow, and you forget about it, and then suddenly it like what you thought was one was two, but now they're bigger. And like so
Yeah.
what so I think that's a good chance for us to start chatting a bit about, okay, we know we all have these things going on, even if it's not us personally, we can at least recognize them collectively in our cultures. There are some cultures who are a bit more violent, who um think that treating women, or even again, because Michelle and I are both parents, like there are some people who think that um children need to behave a certain way, uh, but that aren't, like don't have as many rights, even because they're
Yeah.
smaller. So like, even the way that we treat children can be a collective shadow. Like, how do you as a family, how do you as a culture treat little ones, or people who have again, lots of collective shadows. But how do you even start to deal with that, Michelle? I mean, like, do you start on a personal level? Do you go to protests? Like, what, like, yeah, where are we going to
I
jump in?
well, why don't let's take a little break because we're at the
Right.
halfway mark, and then we are going to come back with how do I deal with it? 'Cause, so it gives me time to think because I'm going to talk about a few. As many of you know, I do Reiki. So how does that lower chakra work translate into physical health, especially when it comes to Reiki? So we will be right back.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Spilling the Tea Leaves podcast with Rachel and Michelle. We've started already a pretty chewy discussion on shadow work, and I'm really excited for Michelle to jump in and start chatting a bit about some of the work that she does with Reiki and chakras, and some of the things that you can do to really start working with your shadow. I'm literally like pen and paper. I am ready. Yes.
All right. So a lot of the clients that I see, because of this new trend in the New Age community, it's everything is love and light and crystals and everything else, and we tend to ignore. And if you separate this in chakra terms, like you tend to focus on your higher chakras, so your third eye, your crown, your throat, and your heart chakras. And a lot of people are very heavily focused on that, but then they ignore their lower chakras, so their basic needs. And a lot of the shadow work that we do are just basic human instincts. Um, we have DNA from our ancestors, and a lot of our ancestors had to do without. They were hunters, they were scavengers. So a lot of these innate feelings or innate our basic human needs we ignore them now, unfortunately. So a lot of the work that I do with clients, or a lot of clients that I see, is heavily focused on lower chakra work. So grounding, your sacral chakra, your solar plexus as well. Um, and for those who don't do that work, or for those who don't ground themselves or really see what they need on this physical plane, they becomes translating into problems like Rachel mentioned, back problems. That pain in the back of your lower back, we start carrying all that stress and all that energy, and it's focused there, and it develops into a knot. And then all the times Reiki, while you try to help with blockages and everything else, it becomes a physical need after that, and you start going to like therapists, and you start getting all these massages and things like that to try to help alleviate the pain. Um, so helping, so chronic back pain is usually suppressed rage, which is usually an emotion of your lower chakras. So for those who are trying to do the work, and I'm just going to go on a rant, so bear with me. When you do when you do lower chakra work, when you're working on your shadow side, one of the techniques, and please interrupt me, Rachel, to add to
I
this.
will. Yep, I
Um,
will.
when you're working on your shadow side, when you're working on things that are so uncomfortable that we have repressed them, you need to first center yourself. So
Okay.
sit in a place, really bring everything in, focus on being present. And then once you start exploring why you're feeling this way, what is it you need to be grounded, why you have these, uh, what we label negative emotions or lower vibrating emotions, you really need to take a step back for a moment and then not judge it. Because we are judging
Ah.
these things and said, "Oh
Ah.
God, I feel bad, or I'm such a horrible person, or I am greedy because I'm a bad person." You just remove the label, remove that negative connotation, that negative mindset, because all you're doing is you're just adding more pressure to the pressure cooker. Oh, you're just like, God, I'm such a horrible person because when I was little, da da da, and then you start going off on these mental rants when the point is to see it without judgments. Like, don't judge the emotion. Don't say this is a bad emotion. It's just an emotion. Like, happy is an emotion, sad is also an emotion. Don't judge it. It's neither good nor bad. And be
We're not
honest
saying,
with yourself.
no, and
Yeah,
we are not saying that this is easy. This requires a great deal of
this is work.
unpacking. No, it is like this,
This is real
this
work.
this is the real, I mean, like, this is the stuff that you have to really want to dig into. And like I was telling Michelle earlier, it's like having a tangle of Christmas lights, or like like little fairy lights or something, and like sometimes you don't even know where to start, and you're just kind of poking at it with like a pen, trying to kind of find an inroad somewhere, and you don't even really know totally where to start, and it's like, and you have to really just want to get this untangled. And
Yeah,
it's
this is
yeah.
real. Yeah, this is real work. This is not lighting a candle and sitting down. This is real emotional work that you're doing. And remove the guilt from yourself. Transmute the guilt. If you feel guilty, give yourself permission to not feel guilty, to say, this is this feeling, having this feeling is okay. And then work from there. But you have to be honest with yourself as well. Be completely 100%. Nobody is judging you, nobody is around. If you choose to share this with somebody, that's
If it's safe
fine.
to, yes, if it's safe to
If
do
it's
so.
safe. Exactly. Like Rachel mentioned, if it's safe to use, just it's safe, fine, then do it. But I invite you to take the moment to with yourself first and have an honest conversation with yourself, and not to feel guilty about it. Um, and talk to yourself. Really, and I'm saying talk out loud to yourself. And you're gonna sound crazy. So if you can do this like in your room, away from people, so they don't have you committed, just talk out loud and have that conversation. It's like, wow, I remember when I was younger and I felt really bad when I didn't get the pair of shoes because and then just really start going down that your own private little rabbit hole and figure out why you have the need to uh, why you feel like you're greedy or why you
Okay.
have this like subtle line of greed. And a lot of the times, aside from natural human instinct, like anger and rage, a lot of these things happen because of childhood traumas. So
Yeah.
not only do we
It,
have our DNA working on with our shadow side, now we have our childhood traumas working our shadow side. And there's a term called reparenting.
okay.
I'm not going to go into it, but it's literally just reparenting yourself. If you go on social media and you look up the hashtag reparenting, there are a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists who have techniques that you can work with. So if you feel that your shadow side or a lot of these emotions that are being triggered are coming up having to do with childhood trauma, I invite you to research that hashtag or just Google reparenting, and that can help start a series of techniques to help you come to terms or view your shadow with a more compassionate
Yeah.
form.
And also to think of yourself, like with reparenting and thinking of, again, even if it was something, for those people who were lucky enough to have super well adjusted parents, that doesn't mean that every decision that they made or that everything that they did was necessarily right for who you are as a person. So it's interesting too. There may be something that was said offhandedly that they meant one way that really affected you. But anyway, and in a way, at least, for those of us who are now adults, to think of yourself as this child, and like Michelle was mentioning, inviting that child to feel these feelings in a safe way, and know that it's not it's not unreasonable for the child to feel that way. It's not unreasonable for your shadow to feel sad, angry, scared, and that these things are
Yeah,
okay, and that you now, as the conscious adult soul that you are able to kind of work in these, because again, there are things that you don't even know are triggers, and that just sort of like come up, and suddenly you're standing there on the brink of tears, like a wounded child. And it's
yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. But again, like Michelle said, there's so much available out there. And again, as a mental health plug, and as someone who has certainly walked these paths, if you feel like you could benefit, and I know a lot of people don't have access to therapy or counseling. There are a lot of free services online now. So I urge you, if you think you might benefit from working with someone who can help you emotionally and help you sort out some of these things, from a professional standpoint, it has helped me greatly. And and that, for a lot of us, it is a really important part of our path, emotionally and spiritually.
absolutely. There is one more thing that now that you mentioned, again, we're going back to the kids scenario. There is in Reiki, there is a long distance Reiki. And for those of you who have reached sort of I believe this is level 2 or the master level. Doesn't matter. Everybody can do Reiki. Some people are just attuned with the symbols or not. But there are instances where I do invite the clients to think of a very specific time when they were children. For those who did not have the well-adjusted parents growing up um, like I did not have the well-adjusted
Yeah.
parents. My father was not well adjusted. Anyway, when you think of an instance when you were younger that really had its moment or it's engraved in your psyche, and a lot of your shadow stems from situations, you can again center yourself, sit in a quiet space. If you need to speak it out loud, speak it out loud, but think back to that moment, like really sit back and be in that moment, as uncomfortable as it is, because it's going to be uncomfortable. And tell your child, tell yourself as a child, it's going to be okay. You are loved, and send as much loving energy to that person or who you were as a child, in order so you can say, I it was a bad moment, but I know that I am loved and I am worthy of love. So, as a personal example, when I was younger, I had a very, very bad experience witnessing violence between my parents. And I did not know that this moment just kind of lingered with me for so long. So it wasn't until I was 32, 33, 30, I was older, where I knew it happened. I knew it was a thing that happened, but I just never visited the emotions of it. And I never thought of sending Reiki or sending positive energy or having uh, or just surrounding myself with love at this very traumatic moment. So my Reiki teacher, my master at the time, she instructed me to just pick a moment in time and send love to myself and words of positivity and affirmation, and telling them that I'm in love, that you're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. This is going to be something that it's going to happen, and there's better things that are coming. I said, sure. I'm still not making connections at this point, right? So I did it. It was beautiful. It really it kind of changed me as a person. Again, Reiki, for those of you who know, Reiki does not understand time. There is no time with Reiki. You can send Reiki to a situation in the past. You can send Reiki to a situation in the future. I can send Reiki to Rachel, and she's like a billion miles away. So after this session was done, and I was cool, I was like, okay, fine. As I walk up and go downstairs, because she had made lunch and she left me there meditating in her studio. I go downstairs. She's like, "How do you feel?" And I'm like, I'm. It feels great." It was just like this absolute, again, my second Reiki release, where I'm just crying and sobbing on her table, and she already had tissues on the table for me. Like, she knew it was going to happen. She's like, it's okay. It always happens. But you just, if there is a moment that you can pinpoint that says, wow, this really brings up a lot of emotions, sit down and talk to yourself, talk to your child, envision yourself hovering over the child in the moment, hovering over yourself. You don't have to be a child. It could have been an event in your teens, 20s, 30s, whatever. And just sharing, you're loved. It's going to be okay. It's going to pass. And surrounding them with a green light, a pink light, whatever you need. And that also has that's also shadow work. That's also facing a situation that a lot of us rather not relive. And I think I talked to Rachel before about this, where I do not like going to my past to relive moments. She's like, well, why not? How are you going to learn from experiences? I'm like, why do I want to learn? But this is a new me, a shadow work me. We're doing this thing. But yes, yes. I don't know if you want to add to that, Rach.
I it is interesting. It's eh, Michelle Michelle has been with me in a lot of I wouldn't even say necessarily my more shadowy times, but Michelle is used to me being miserable. Is that the right way to put it?
Oh,
I'm no, I'm there's no there's a lot. Well, I I I don't know if this is, because of my background and my upbringing, and my background with what I dealt with as a child and now as an adult. But I don't know, I mean, yeah, I don't enjoy the deeper and darker emotions necessarily, but I also, and I think maybe a lot of people who have been diagnosed with depression, or I don't know, there's kind of there's oftentimes maybe we're used to it in a way, or it's just kind of more, I don't know. So, for me, Like, and we've talked a bit about how I fear is probably for me one of my bigger shadow. Well, and rage, I'm finding out, but I'll work on that later. Anyway, so fear. I feel a lot of fear, a great deal of the time, and I have quite a few tattoos. We'll chat about those some other time. But one of my tattoos actually has a spider on it, and I've mentioned in past podcasts, and then also quite a bit on my Insta about spiders coming up for me when I'm in fear and when I'm living in fear, when I'm making decisions in fear, and I'm also tiny spiders are quite cute, but like I'm a bit scared of spiders, and so there's but again, like, and here I have one, and I specifically wanted one permanently etched onto my being because I don't know, there's I I don't want to say I'm comfortable with the darkness. I don't enjoy kind of looking at the things that have been painful for me, but I also recognize, I don't know, there's been so much growth that has come from it. And so many of the things too that I've been worried about or scared of, or that have actually happened that have been objectively bad. For instance, I've been through a divorce, and it was awful. Divorce is like having a tornado go through your life. But I'm also really grateful for it. So I think too, like with shadow work and being able to kind of hold space with these scarier, uglier, darker, whether they're experiences like divorce or trauma in childhood, or feelings or parts of ourselves that we have that we don't like with me, with fear that comes up, a lot. I also, you know, there are gifts there too. Whether they come through now, they probably won't. But will you be glad for having gone through them? Will you be glad for having untangled the knots? I can I can almost 100% say you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, so so I think for me, so I guess what I want to say about that is, like, I see the value in the work, and I see the value in these darker places and darker experiences that we all have, and and that's why I paid for someone to draw a spider on me, because I really see the value
Wow.
in the scary stuff.
They shape
Not to
us.
say.
They shape us who we are. They shape, if everything was perfect and pretty and lovely and unicorns and rainbows, then we can kind of be the same person. So it does work. I wanted to ask you something before we end it, Rachel, and get your opinion. Actually, you are the one that asked the question. So maybe you should read this out loud. Like
Okay.
what question, girl?
Yeah, so Michelle and I do a lot of homework and prep work for our, so that we're fully here when we're doing our podcast. And one of the questions that came up as we were prepping for this particular episode was, what is the goal of a spiritual practice as it pertains to shadow work? Are we attempting as spiritual beings to transcend? I mean, are we supposed to sit under the body tree and get beyond the darkness and beyond the physical needs and beyond sort of the, are we the lotus growing in the muck? Well, do we need the muck? Should we be growing away from the muck? So it's this question of things like jealousy, shame, control. How do you incorporate or embrace that, or do you? Or is the point of all this to get above and beyond those things that we know are darker? What do you think, Michelle?
I think it's almost like a spectrum.
Okay.
So we are human, and depending where we are on our journey, we have to work with our shadow side. We integrate it into ourselves to make it whole, and we work from that point. As a lot of the masters, the ascended masters, have learned to work with their shadow side to the point where they're no longer having a reaction or a knee-jerk reaction to their shadow side and just working with it. They understand it's there. it's no longer affecting them the way it affects us muggle folk, if that may be. So I do think there is a spectrum for us, and right now we're working with a shadow side. We're getting familiar with it. A lot of us have ignored it for so long that we have no idea that it's there, and we do not even acknowledge it. So this poor thing is in its cage that's never been locked out or never been let out for it to walk. Or in Rachel's case, in this pretty insane asylum, they forgot to give her snacks, and she has a potty break. Like it's not good. So I do think it's a spectrum. For the most part, like 99% of the spectrum, it's us working with it, acknowledging it, integrating into ourselves, knowing how we react, why we react that way, where it came from, where these emotions came from, where these instincts came from, and then once we reach that hopefully level that we all get to one day, that is that master level, like Jesus and God and everybody else, how to that's when we are able to transcend it, acknowledging it, know it's there, and not have that reaction at our kids' baseball game. Or in my case, at the battle title on Saturday, where I was about to punch people. I'm like, why? I've been waiting in line for an hour. You are not going to cut me because I will physically cut you. But yeah, what do you think it is? What do you think is the goal?
Oh, it's
It's hard.
uh, I don't know. I don't know that it's possible. Even if that is the goal, let's say we all want to transcend the lower and the base parts of ourself, but I don't think you can. I've been, of course, reading. I've been reading. So Sarah Wilson is an author. I'm reading a book of hers, fairly recently published, and she actually interviewed the Dalai Lama, and she was mentioning that, like, the the Dalai Lama, like, he still runs on the treadmill and he still gets frustrated about stuff, and it's,
Yeah, of
and
course.
right. I mean, and it's just like, we're human. I think that um I think that we are going to have to, in whatever form it takes for each of us as individuals, and then each of us culturally and within our little family units, I think we're going to have to make peace with these aspects of ourself. And in what form that takes, again, for each of us as individuals, for each of us as a family, the way that my family deals with anger and how comfortable we are with it may or may not work for your family, and how you deal with anger, or, again, shame, or, any of the things that are shadowy. But I do think, whether or not, I don't think embrace is the right word, but I think maybe, again, coexist, respect that this is what we're dealing with, respect that in this incarnation on this earth as muggles, we're walking around with bodies and with emotions, and we have some scars, we have some emotional scars, we have some triggers, we have some traumas, all of us do. um
Yeah.
ho-
I like
yeah.
embracing though. It's acknowledging is embracing, I feel like, isn't it? It's just it's there. And I'm not saying embrace it like, oh, this, I'm gonna breach out at every person, but knowing that it's there and it's a part of me, and it's something that I can work through whatever needs to be worked through, and whatever I can't work through, or it's just part of my instinct, is there. And because if you don't embrace what's a part of you, then you're literally just rejecting half of you.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's something
exactly.
its own, that's a whole nother set of baggage. That's a whole nother podcast.
No, it is. Well, and I, well, being able to accept all of you as you are in any given moment, this idea of radical acceptance for yourself as a whole entity, including all those shadowy bits, opens up the door, even just a little bit, for acceptance of other human beings who are walking this path and have their own shadows. So as we start with our own selves, with our own houses, to just again maybe soften those edges a bit about what you're willing to let in. Not that we accept it and say that acting on it is okay. Again, I want to be very clear in our distinctions here. Not that the
Yes.
things that happen to us are acceptable, not that you put
Mhm.
up with stuff. You set your people, set
Mhm.
your boundaries. You don't
Mhm.
allow for things to happen. However, we recognize too that we often, again, we all have these parts of ourselves, and set your boundaries, protect yourself, but also forgive yourself, and notice that we're all as humans, at least if nothing else, we all are working on this. We all have this. And like I said, the sense of radical, at least this willingness to at least entertain the notion of accepting yourself as a whole being, opens all of us up to accepting each other as whole beings, which I think is that's the direction I'm trying to go in anyway, is again just
Like that.
yeah. So
Perfect.
that's why we
I
work
think,
on our shadows, folks.
yeah. And I think that's a perfect place to end it. A very
Cool.
loving place for a very dark-ish episode. Not dark, just the other side of the moon episode.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, anything else that you want to add, Rachel?
No, I'm grateful to have a space to kind of talk about this deeper, these are some of the deeper wounds. And I love Insta. I really love the spiritual community that I'm a part of there. But um, there aren't as many venues or opportunities for the discussions like this. So I'm just glad
Yeah.
Michelle wants to hang out with me and talk about this stuff, and that you guys would be willing to listen to that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. We are getting a lot of play all over the world, which is a little intimidating for me, which is probably my shadow side that I need to work on. Okay. Um, but yeah, I'm absolutely grateful that we have this space and the technology to be able to connect halfway across the world and then
Mhm.
connect with the rest of the world. I've met some really, really cool people so far on this podcast journey. Um, yeah, I'm totally, totally digging this. I wanted to just a little bit of housekeeping. Rachel has officially started our Instagram. So
Oh, I hope you guys like it.
we're on Instagram. Yay!
Yay.
Rachel started our Instagram. It's our handle is Spilling Leaves, correct?
Yes, at
Yes.
Spilling Leaves.
At Spilling Leaves. You can find that on our website as well at spillingthetealeaves.com. We have Twitter with Spilling Leaves as well, and our Facebook, which is facebook.com/spilling the tea leaves. Um, but yeah, we're in it. We're doing this, guys. This is exciting. And hopefully soon we'll have a Patreon. We're trying to sort it up and send it out. So if there's something that you want to see or something that you would like for us to offer you, please let us know in the comments. Make sure you're watching us on YouTube. Just search, oh, sorry, drop crystal. Just search Spilling the Tea Leaves and you can find our channel. Again, my name is Michelle. I'm a Reiki crystal master and teacher, and you can find me at rememberlovehealing.com, and you can also find me on Instagram at rememberlove. This is my beautiful friend Rachel.
Hi, guys. I am an animal intuitive. You can find me on Instagram at CottageonWolfLane. I would love to hear from you, and yeah, we're just glad to have you guys around. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. Make sure you are sharing, leaving a comment, and subscribing. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.